In the early years of the 13th century, a silent tension spread across the plains of Asia. The Jin Dynasty, ruling from their grand capital, Zhongdu, the city that would one day become Beijing, believed themselves untouchable. Their walls were colossal, their treasury overflowing, and their armies vast. Yet beneath their golden surface lay cracks that only a relentless force like Genghis Khan could exploit. For decades, the Jin had treated the Mongols as insignificant nomads, demanding tribute and forcing them into humiliating agreements. But the steppe forgets nothing. And the man rising among the Mongols was unlike any before him. Temujin, now known to the world as Genghis Khan, had unified the steppe tribes, forged them into a war machine, and carved through kingdoms like a blade through cloth. To him, the Jin insult was not just political, it was personal. As winter turned to spring, Mongol scouts reported the weaknesses of the Jin frontier. Corruption in the court, divided generals, starving peasants, and border forts crumbling under mismanagement. Genghis Khan realized the time had come. The Mongol Empire would move south, not for plunder but for justice. And the greatest objective of all was the shining metropolis of Zhongdu. But before he could strike the heart, he needed to break the limbs. In 1211, Genghis Khan summoned his commanders, Jebi the Arrow, Subutai the strategist, and his fearless sons. Tens of thousands of horsemen gathered across the plains. No music, no banners, just the endless thunder of hooves. As the dust clouds rose, the Jin Dynasty had no idea that a storm was coming. A storm that would change China forever. And this is where our story truly begins. As the Mongol armies crossed the Jin frontier, the world witnessed a type of warfare it had never seen before. The Jin officials believed the steppe warriors were nothing more than wild riders, but their illusion shattered the moment the Mongols entered their territory. Speed, precision, and discipline, this was not chaos. This was organized destruction. Villages along the border were the first to feel the impact. Mongol scouts rode far ahead, mapping every road, every river, every defensive post. Behind them, elite cavalry units struck like lightning. They didn't just defeat armies, they erased them. Entire Jin garrisons vanished before warning could reach Zhongdu. The Jin generals, confused and slow to react, sent fragmented forces in every direction. But to the Mongols, this was exactly what Genghis Khan wanted, an enemy divided, panicked, and blind. Meanwhile, Subutai, the mastermind of maneuver warfare, executed a wide flanking strategy. He carved through the countryside, isolating strongholds and cutting off supply lines. The Jin Dynasty suddenly found itself defending 1,000 small fires instead of one great battlefield. Inside Zhongdu, the court still believed the walls of the capital would protect them. Ministers comforted the emperor with reports, claiming the barbarian threat was exaggerated. But every day, refugees poured into the city with horror stories. Cities burned, generals defeated, and borderlands collapsing. Panic rose, yet the imperial court refused to accept the truth. By late 1212, the Mongols had advanced so deep that the Jin emperor could no longer deny the crisis. Emergency councils were held, taxes increased, and messengers sent to summon distant armies. But it was too late. The Mongols had already taken control of the northern plains. And as winter approached, the Jin Dynasty expected the invaders to retreat. But the Mongols did not retreat. They thrived in winter, and that single fact changed everything. Because now, for the first time, the road to Zhongdu lay open. And as icy winds swept across the lands of the Jin Dynasty, one terrifying truth began to spread across every fortress, every village, and every commander's heart. The Mongols did not retreat in winter. They became unstoppable. While snow buried the countryside, Mongol cavalry moved faster than ever. Their horses, built for brutal cold, glided across frozen ground with incredible speed. Jin forces, weighed down by heavy armor and struggling with exhausted supply lines, began to crumble. What the Jin believed would be a winter pause became a season of destruction. City after city fell, not to overwhelming numbers, but to Mongol ingenuity. Their engineers used winter as a weapon. They froze rivers to march across defenses, poured water on wooden gates to crack them with ice, and tunneled beneath walls while snowstorms hid their movements. Every day the Jin frontier shrank. Every night fires lit the horizon. Inside Zhongdu, fear grew like a shadow. Ministers whispered in corners. Generals argued over strategy, and corrupt officials abandoned their posts. The emperor was fed lies, reports claiming the Mongols were weakening. But refugees told a different story. The Mongols are coming. Nothing stops them. Then came the moment that shattered all doubt. A lone messenger stumbled into Zhongdu, half-frozen, bleeding, barely alive. As he collapsed at the city gates, he cried out with his last breath, "The Mongols are less than 100 miles away." Silence fell over the imperial court. Hands trembled. Faces drained of color. Zhongdu, one of the greatest cities of Asia, was no longer safe. The capital began sealing its gates, preparing for a siege it had hoped would never come. And yet, the worst was still ahead, because now, for the first time, the Mongols were preparing their deadliest skill, siege warfare. As Zhongdu scrambled to seal its gates, far beyond the horizon the Mongols were assembling something the Jin Dynasty had never imagined: a fully engineered siege army. Genghis Khan understood one truth. To take the greatest city in the east, he needed more than cavalry. He needed machines of war. Across snow-covered plains, his commanders gathered engineers from Khwarezm, Persia, and the Muslim world, experts in mechanics, mathematics, and siegecraft. Under their direction, an entire forest of siege weapons began to rise: towering catapults, massive trebuchets, shielded battering rams, and movable iron-plated towers taller than Zhongdu's outer walls. The Jin Dynasty believed the nomads of the steppe lacked the skill for siege warfare. But what they didn't know was that Genghis Khan had turned the Mongol Empire into a university of war, absorbing every talent, every technology, and every expert from the lands he conquered. Meanwhile, inside Zhongdu, the atmosphere grew tense. The emperor ordered the strengthening of walls, the storage of grain, and the drafting of every man capable of holding a spear. Blacksmiths worked day and night forging armor. Archers filled the ramparts. The city had never looked more prepared. But preparation means nothing when facing an enemy who understands your defense is better than you do. By late spring, the horizon trembled with dust. Tens of thousands of Mongol warriors approached, slowly, deliberately, escorted by siege engines rolling like iron beasts across the plains. Zhongdu soldiers stared in disbelief. This was no hit-and-run cavalry raid. This was a full-scale, scientifically engineered, empire-ending assault. The first volleys began at dusk. Stones the size of boulders crashing into the outer walls, shaking homes, cracking towers, and sending shockwaves through the entire capital. The siege had not officially begun, but Zhongdu already felt the weight of the falling world, and soon the Mongols would strike again. Closer, harder, and with a precision that terrified even their own enemies. The true siege was about to begin. As the first night of bombardment ended, Zhongdu's defenders realized something horrifying. The Mongols were only testing their strength. What they had witnessed was not the real attack. It was merely the opening breath of a giant preparing to strike. At sunrise, the damage became clear. Entire sections of the outer wall were fractured. Defensive towers leaned dangerously. Homes near the ramparts lay buried under rubble. And yet the Mongols had not advanced. Not charged, not even attempted a breach. They simply watched. This silence terrified the defenders more than the stones themselves. The imperial generals tried to reassure the people, claiming the walls would hold. But panic rippled across the capital. Markets closed, temples filled with desperate prayers, and citizens rushed to gather food. The fear spread faster than fire. Outside the walls, the Mongols worked with chilling discipline. Dozens of engineers measured impact angles, adjusted trebuchets, and recalibrated distances. To them, this was mathematics, not war. Every strike, every stone, every test run had been recorded to prepare for the perfect assault. Meanwhile, Mongol cavalry circled the countryside, burning farms, capturing supply convoys, and sealing every escape route. Zhongdu had become an isolated island surrounded by an ocean of enemies. Inside the palace, the emperor held emergency councils. Ministers argued endlessly. Some demanded a counterattack, others urged surrender, and a few whispered of fleeing the city. The indecision at the top filtered down to every soldier on the wall. Confidence cracked, fear grew. By the third day, the Mongols launched their second wave. But this time it wasn't stones. It was fire. Flaming projectiles streaked across the sky like falling stars, exploding against rooftops and igniting entire districts. Smoke engulfed the horizon. Bells rang endlessly as citizens formed human chains to extinguish the flames. Yet amidst the chaos, a chilling truth emerged. The Mongols were not trying to take the city. Not yet. They were breaking its spirit. And every hour, Zhongdu was becoming weaker, physically and psychologically. The real assault was drawing near, as fires raged inside Zhongdu, and smoke curled above its mighty walls. Genghis Khan finally made his first decisive move, a move that would alter the course of the siege forever. Instead of launching an immediate full-force attack, he ordered something unexpected, a complete encirclement of the capital. Tens of thousands of Mongol horsemen spread out in a perfect ring around Zhongdu, blocking every gate, every road, and every possible escape. No one entered and no one left. Merchants, refugees, and messengers all were turned back or captured. The city became a prison sealed under the steppe sky. Genghis Khan understood something the Jin Dynasty had failed to grasp. Cities do not fall by walls. They fall by hunger. Inside Zhongdu, food supplies were already strained. The countryside was burned, granaries were destroyed, and caravans that once fed the capital never arrived. Within weeks, prices tripled. Panic buyers emptied markets. Families hid whatever grain they could find. Soldiers grew uneasy as rations shrank. Meanwhile, the Mongols tightened their grip. Subutai archers eliminated scout parties. Jeeb's cavalry destroyed reinforcement attempts. Every Jin movement was anticipated and crushed. From the palace windows, the emperor could see Mongol watchfires stretching across the horizon, an unbroken circle of glowing red eyes staring back at the city. But Genghis Khan did not rely on starvation alone. He prepared a second blow, one that struck at the very mind of Zhongdu. For days, the Mongols launched volleys not of stones, but of messages, tied to arrows and shot into the city. These notes promised mercy to anyone who surrendered, and annihilation to anyone who resisted. The effect was immediate. Fear spread. Rumors erupted. Loyalty wavered. And just when Zhongdu thought the worst had come, the Mongols made their next move, one that would send shockwaves through the entire empire. They began building siege towers, taller than the city walls themselves. The message was clear. The Mongols were preparing for the final stage. The fall of Zhongdu was no longer a possibility. It was a countdown. As Mongol siege towers rose from the earth like giants, Zhongdu realized the final battle was approaching. Never before had the Jin Dynasty seen such monstrous machines, built from freshly cut timber, plated with wet hides to resist fire, and pushed by hundreds of soldiers. These towers grew taller each day until their top platforms reached the same height as Zhongdu's walls. From the ramparts, Jin archers trembled as they watched the impossible unfold. The Mongols were not just attacking, they were redefining warfare. But the towers were only the beginning. Genghis Khan ordered the construction of massive counterweight trebuchets, operated by foreign engineers with unmatched precision. These machines hurled enormous stones that smashed entire wall sections, leaving clouds of dust rising over the city. Each strike felt like an earthquake. Homes shook, towers crumbled, morale collapsed. Inside Zhongdu, the emperor's council fell into chaos. Some generals insisted on a final stand. Others begged for negotiation. But the emperor, desperate and confused, refused to surrender. He believed reinforcements from the south would arrive in time, yet none came. Meanwhile, the Mongols intensified their pressure. At night, their drums thundered across the plains, deep, rhythmic, unending, a psychological assault designed to break the spirit of the defenders before the armies even clashed. Starvation tightened its grip. Rice became rarer than gold. Children cried from hunger. Soldiers grew weak. Disease spread through crowded districts. The once great capital began to rot from within. Then came the most terrifying sight yet. One morning, as the sun rose through the haze, the defenders saw dozens of Mongol towers lined up in perfect formation, each one bristling with archers. Above them, massive shields of woven reeds formed mobile walls, protecting the siege crews below. And in the distance, a new shape appeared. A colossal storm ram, an armored battering engine designed to punch through city gates. For Zhongdu, it meant only one thing. The Mongols were preparing for a direct assault. The defenders tightened their grip on their weapons. The people hid in their homes. The emperor prayed for a miracle, but no miracle was coming. The gates of Zhongdu were about to face the full fury of the Mongol Empire. And as the colossal storm ram advanced toward Zhongdu's gates, the city's defenders braced for the most violent clash of the entire siege. Hundreds of soldiers lined the walls. Shields raised, arrows knocked, hearts pounding. The gates, once symbols of Jin strength, now shuddered under the looming shadow of Mongol machinery. With a deafening roar, the ram struck the first wall. Timber splintered, stone cracked, and a cloud of dust filled the air. Yet the Mongols did not falter. They pushed, pulled, and swung the massive device again and again. Every strike was calculated, every movement precise, honed by years of siegecraft. From above, Mongol archers rained arrows like a storm, cutting down anyone daring to leave the walls. Engineers protected by wooden shields climbed the towers, ready to breach the ramparts once the walls gave way. It was not just a battle of strength, it was a battle of strategy, timing, and sheer psychological terror. Inside Zhongdu, chaos reigned. Families hid beneath floors. Soldiers screamed orders over the thunder of stones, and fires started to consume parts of the city. Smoke and dust made it impossible to see or breathe clearly. Yet the Mongols advanced relentlessly, as if the very earth itself commanded them forward. The emperor watched helplessly as his city, once proud, once untouchable, bent beneath the pressure. Generals urged desperate counterattacks, but every sortie was annihilated. Every wall repair was smashed by the next wave of battering rams. The defenders were exhausted, hungry, and terrified. By nightfall, the first breach appeared. Stone and timber fell, leaving a yawning gap in the outer wall. Mongol storm towers moved forward like titans ready to pour into the city. Zhongdu had survived countless threats in its long history, but never had it faced an enemy like this. The final assault was imminent, and the city's fate teetered on the edge of destruction. And with the breach in the wall, Mongol soldiers poured into Zhongdu, turning streets into rivers of fire and blood. The first wave stormed through the opening, shields locked, swords and spears flashing. The city, once alive with markets, temples and laughter, erupted into chaos and screams. Jin defenders fought desperately, but exhaustion and hunger had weakened them. Every block, every alley became a battlefield. Fires spread uncontrollably as flaming arrows rained down from Mongol towers, consuming homes and granaries alike. Smoke filled the sky, blocking the sun, turning day into twilight. The emperor watched from the palace windows as his capital, his empire, crumbled. Loyal soldiers fell, barricades shattered, and entire districts surrendered to panic. The Mongols moved with calculated precision, striking fast, retreating, then returning to strike again. Civilians fled into narrow streets only to find themselves trapped. Families hid under debris, praying for mercy. But the Mongols were relentless. Their discipline, honed on the steppe, transformed the city into a trap where no one could escape. By nightfall, Zhongdu was fractured. Key districts were burning, supply depots destroyed, and morale utterly shattered. The city's defenses, once considered impenetrable, now served only to channel people into the paths of Mongol soldiers. And in the heart of the city, the emperor realized the unthinkable. Zhongdu could not be saved. The Mongols had turned strategy, patience, and fear into a weapon far deadlier than any sword or bow. The fall was no longer a threat, it was inevitable. Tomorrow the city would be claimed. At dawn, Zhongdu stood on the brink of annihilation. Smoke and fire had consumed large portions of the city, and the Mongol forces pressed from every angle. Through the breach, horsemen poured in, followed by infantry and siege towers, moving with terrifying coordination. The streets became a battlefield of chaos, with defenders overwhelmed and civilians caught in the crossfire. The emperor fled the palace, abandoning his people. Generals surrendered or were cut down. Mongol soldiers looted the granaries, palaces, and temples. Silk, gold, weapons, and supplies fell into their hands. Every building burned, every street was scarred, and the city that had stood for centuries was reduced to rubble and ash. Yet the true victory was not just material. The fall of Zhongdu sent a message to the entire Jin Dynasty and to the world. No fortress, no matter how grand, could withstand the Mongol Empire. Genghis Khan's forces did not stop at looting. Skilled artisans, engineers, and craftsmen were taken back to the Mongol heartlands, helping to expand their military machine even further. And the survivors, traumatized, starving, and demoralized, would carry the tale of Zhongdu's fall for generations. The Mongol Empire now controlled the northern plains of China. Zhongdu was gone, but the legend of its siege endured. It became a symbol of unstoppable force, of strategy, discipline, and the terrifying genius of Genghis Khan. From the ashes of Zhongdu rose a stark warning. Empires rise, cities endure, but against the storm of the Mongols, no wall, no army, no hope could withstand them. And thus, the greatest city of the Jin Dynasty fell, forever changing the history of China and the world.